that's it as in terms of CCIM. And I just want to take a minute and introduce Ann. I could take probably a whole hour talking about her, but I don't think you guys will like that. So I'm just going to take a very brief intro for her. She's known as the Forgery Sleuth and is board certified in document examination and has been court qualified since 1982, testifying in federal and superior courts on forgery and fraud. Her work includes, but is not limited to, wills, deeds, contracts, medical records, calendar, journal, and notary entries, anonymous letters, hate mail, graffiti, and elder fraud. She has provided training for the State Bar of California, State Bar of Illinois, California Association of Police Training, Northern California Fraud Investigators, American Association of Legal Nurse Consultants, Safeway Stores, Pacific Bell, and others. Clients include Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley, Federal Express, Coldwell Banker, Chicago Title, State Farm, Kaiser Permanente, and others, along with major law firms throughout the United States. I can go on, but as I said, I'll be spending a whole day if I did that. So I will just like to welcome Ann here and feel really excited and honored that she has been open to and accepted our invitation to share her knowledge with us. Go ahead, Ann.
Good morning. I think first I should just go ahead and jump in and share my screen and we'll get started because we have a lot to cover, okay?
Right. I guess I have to stop sharing so you can share.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Share. And I'll minimize this. So let me just say that once I do this, my screen is filled. I won't be able to see you. So I won't be asking people to raise their hands because I can't see it, but just an acknowledgement verbally. I'm just going to ask you one quick question. What percentage of forgeries are done by professionals? Do you think 90%, 95%? So I need you to unmute yourselves and just give me some idea of what the percentage is of forgeries that are done by professionals.
20%.
30%.
Okay, 20, 30. 30's the highest you've got?
5.
Well, 1% of forgeries are done by professionals.
Wow.
So who's doing the rest? Family, friends, relatives. Why would you rob a bank when the bank of grandma has everything that you need and she's not going to turn you into the authorities? So the culprits are us. We're stealing from family and friends. We know where the money is. So let me make one point really clear. People will bring me a scan of a fax, of a photocopy and they're, you guys have watched way too much CSI. And you think we just put it up on the window and then we put another copy over it and then we could see what's going on. 50% of the opinions from the FBI are inconclusive, and that's because they have insufficient handwriting or poor quality handwriting. So I'm going to show you today, we really need to have good stuff. So let me ask you again, how many different people do you think signed this person's name? How many females, how many males? How many different writers do we have here? And I need you to unmute yourselves. So
5.
Okay.
Somebody said 2. Somebody said 2.
2. Let's say this is a signature on a check, and let's say this is a signature on a will. All of these signatures were done by one individual. This is just their natural range of variation. Sometimes they print, sometimes they do script. So I would be making a big mistake if somebody brings me a will, and this happens a lot. A gentleman passes away and the wife brings in a will, the girlfriend brings in a will, and the son brings in a will. And how many of them did he sign, if any? So I have to have enough samples to know what the person's natural range of variation is, because now, can you see my cursor right here? I'll put it over the red arrow.
Yeah.
So, so
Yes.
you've got a printed G and then you've got a script G, but we do different things at different times. So, and a big mistake that men will make is they'll say, well, I'll make my signature illegible and then nobody can forge it. Actually, you know what I'm going to do since you're recording this, just real quickly, I'm going to take and remove that thing from the top so you get a better image of the whole screen. So, and I'll put this down here. So these are all genuine signatures, but they're very easy to forge. And you think a teller at the bank is going to look and go, oh, that doesn't look exactly like his. A scribble looks like a scribble. And yes, she's going to cash the check. So let me give you some examples. Here's a card that supposedly a father sent to a son and said, you know, you're now into the half-century era. I'm approaching a full century. His son was a stockbroker, and the father is saying, just consider my account your own and just put it in both our names with joint tenancy. And that's my birthday gift to you. Love, Dad. Wouldn't we all like to get a birthday card like that? The problem is when we look at Dad's writing doesn't look anything like the writing on the card. Another big important thing to remember, the age Dad was when that card was written. This is what Dad's writing looked like at that time. He couldn't write this big, strong, powerful signature. So if you have contemporaneous samples, you could easily see, no, Dad didn't write that. But guess what? The son did send postcards home, to camp to his two daughters, signing Love, Dad. And this is the son's writing on the postcards, which matches the writing on the birthday card he supposedly received from his dad. Now, this was an account worth $700,000 that got emptied. There are other little things you want to look at. Now, I realize you can't see this very well over here, but I wanted to include it because people have habit patterns of how they date. The son dates like this. The father would never do an abbreviated date like this. The father writes the dates out. So not only is it not his signature, not only did he not type it, the son probably thought, well, if I type the whole thing, no one will ever be able to trace it back to me. They'll think it's Dad. But we all have habit patterns of how we date things, of how we sign things. Then, just for the heck of it, I said to the attorney handling the case, we've got a barcode here. This is ambassador cards. Let's contact the legal department and see, when was this card first released on the market? Now, why would I ask a question like that? Because there was no envelope produced with the card. That's a red flag that says there's no postmark, there's no date. Well, sure enough, the son received this birthday card from his father before it was even available out on the market for sale. So that was impossible for the father to send the card to the son because the card wasn't even out on the market yet. And that's pretty hard. That was our little sort of smoking gun that we brought into court. That's pretty hard to argue with. So yes, the handwriting was not his, but basically the barcode killed him anyway. It absolutely identified that it was a phony document. Here's a man who was getting ready for early retirement, and then he wound up going through a divorce. And I always say, oh gosh, you wonder, wedding cakes should probably have the bride, the groom, and their attorneys when they start. Is there a prenup or not? What happened in this case, which is interesting, is the wife had hired me, but the wife went back and found a bunch of old invoices and she signed her husband's name. And she got old Valentine cards and birthday cards, and she was signing for him. And she said, now see, this is my husband's signature. This is his handwriting. And something didn't seem right to me. So I did some further research in public records and found signatures of her husband that didn't look at all like the way she had signed. She even canceled his contractor's license. I mean, this was a very unhappy wife. And she was going to have me compare forged to forged. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't help you because you've been signing your husband's name. Now, most of you are in real estate, so I am going to show you a few cases with regard to real estate. This is a family that owned a great deal of real estate, apartment buildings, little strip malls, a shopping center, and there were 146 forged, notarized signatures in this case. The case settled, so I can't show you the signatures, but just know these were all forged. And what happened was, this was a big old Italian Catholic family, very old fashioned. There were 5 kids. Now, when I say kids, the kids could be 45, 55 years old. 1 son, 4 daughters. The parents put the son in charge because that's just how they did things. And he would do things like take the anchor tenant, like a Best Buy store, and he would set up a separate trust, and he would transfer that building into a different trust that he owned, that was in his name. And he had dozens of these trusts, and he was transferring massive amounts of real estate over to himself. But people will often say to me, but it's notarized. Well, let's take a look at a notary journal. How can you notarize something on November 10th and come back a week later and it's November 3rd? How does that work? Or we have something, when you start seeing things like this, where day after day after day, we just don't have the right date. These were all written at one time. These were all entered on the same day. I put infrared luminescence on the ink. They're all done with the same pen, with the same ink. These are not genuine notary entries. You look at something like this and you think, well, that's pretty good. They did all these on January 24th. Oh, here's some more on the 24th, change pens. Here we don't know, is it February, is it January, but it's the 28th. You'd think you'd know by then if it was January or February. Now notice all of these are written at the same time, same spacing, same size, same ink. Even though the beginning of the entry is in black, it finishes off in blue ballpoint because the person was first entering. Oh, well, let's make it look like it's legitimate. So I'll change pens for a couple of entries. Now I'll change pens again for a couple of entries. Then they go back later and start adding all these dates, and they're tired by then. So why bother to change pens? Let's just hang on to what we have. It happens here too. All these entries were done with the same pen, and these cover a month's time, but it's all done at once. My personal favorite, this one was notarized on February 31st. That's not easy to do, even in a leap year. So I don't have any verbal feedback, so I don't know if you're there. Are you catching what I'm showing you? Okay, so everybody's gone to sleep?
Yeah, we get it.
February 31st?
Yeah, we were on mute.
Okay, but people will say, but it's notarized. Well, all of those things you saw were notarizations, and they were all fake. I had a situation with a large bank in New York, which shall remain nameless, and they were trying to take the home away from someone in Salinas because he could no longer pay his mortgage. He'd lost his job. He was late 50s. He was having a very difficult time finding a new job, and they made the mistake of giving me the notary journal. And this was back in 2007, 2008, when we had our mortgage meltdown. And there were page after page after page of notarizations that they had just taken the notary stamp and forged her name. Anyway, we got to save his house, but that bank really, should not have given us that notary journal. It kind of looked like the February 31st one. Now you may say elder fraud. Well, I'm in real estate. I don't need to know about elder fraud. Well, what about all the elder people that are now selling their buildings or transferring their buildings to their kids, or what's happening? One thing I wanted to show you with the stroke. Now this happens to be my mother's own signature, and I have witnessed all these signatures. So I wanted to, give you an example where I could say, I have been there personally and I have looked at these, and this is what has happened. These are different samples of handwriting, 98, 2001. After she had a massive stroke, this is what her handwriting looked like. This was her signature. Now she could talk to you and she could explain anything you wanted to know. She could answer any question. She was perfectly clear of mind, but the neuromuscular connections were gone. Here's a mistake that people make. You get a family and maybe the kids live back in Chicago, New York, wherever, and the father and mother have retired to Texas, Arizona, California, wherever it's warm, Florida, and maybe there's one kid that's living near where the parents are. And all the other kids say when there's a codicil to the will or a quitclaim deed, Dad didn't sign that. Dad couldn't sign that. Dad had a stroke. His writing didn't look like that anymore. Well, I want to show you what happened to the writing 6 weeks after that stroke. It's back. It's not back perfectly, but it's back. Here's before the stroke. Here's a day after the stroke. Here's 6 weeks after the stroke. People think that handwriting progressively deteriorates, but as you can see, that's not what happened here. Now, another mistake that people will make is they'll look and say, this should be M-A-H-O-N-Y, and here's an M-A-S-H. Oh, well, it's misspelled. Well, that must have been the caregiver at the home, and she was stealing from the, no, they make all these assumptions. My mother signed these. This was what she was capable of doing. She was trying to make an H, and eventually she got to make the H. She couldn't even make the H here, but these are her genuine signatures. So when you're looking at signatures on wills, on trusts, on quitclaim deeds, you've got to have contemporaneous samples to know what that person was capable of at that time. And I give attorneys who do wills and trusts all kinds of tips to get that done. I won't get into this. Okay, real estate. I'm sure you run into leases. Now you're going to think the things I show you are simple and, you know, but it happens all the time. So this says no more than 2 residents can live in this unit. All they did was change it to 3 after the landlord had signed it. In addition, there's permission to garden in the backyard. Well, there wasn't permission to garden in the backyard, and they built a koi pond. They put in a yurt. They had a subtenant who was living in the back tent. And what happened was the owners went away on an extended vacation to Europe for 6 weeks. The nephew was taking in the rent checks, and the person living in the yurt submitted a check, and he accepted it. And you know what happened from then on. When time came to sell the property and try to get him out, but they had accepted payment from him at one time. Now, this one is very interesting, and I'm sorry I don't have better pictures. I am going to show you close-ups, but I was not allowed to keep this lease in my possession. There are 5 different pens on this lease, and it's an option to renew the lease for 25 years at 1699 Haight, which is a commercial property. You can see this is the Panhandle near the entrance to Golden Gate Park. And it's full of sandwiches and soft drinks, and anybody that wants to go to the park can just stop there and pick up something. It's a very lucrative, very desirable location. And this person said he sat down and talked to the owner, a much older lady, and she allowed him to extend his lease for 25 years. I guess he wanted it for 15 at first, and then he decided, oh, why not 25? Let's just go for it. These were not the same inks, although they were both black. We put it under infrared light, and this ink, ballpoint, disappeared, whereas the felt tip ink still showed up. We showed that it had been doctored and altered. Wait till you see the notarization. This is the notarization, which was backdated 8 months. And it was kind of sloppy there, so they went and wrote it more neatly here. You will not believe me when I tell you that the judge could not make a decision if this document had been altered or just it was a faulty pen. I took in magnifiers and lights into the courtroom. I gave him everything he could possibly need. So it came out all right, but you've probably seen things like this where a 3 is changed to an 8 or a 5. What I wanted to warn you, in 2020, people were often signing just 20, which left you wide open. Nobody had to rewrite over anything. You could date this from the year 2000 to 2099. So I would tell people, write the whole date, write 2020, which neither of these people did. And so it was very easy to add these other numbers. Now it's 2021. I still say, don't just write the 21, right? 2021. Well, a 1 is very easy to change to a 4, a 9, a 7, a 6, a 5. So it may look silly, but I say to people, put the serifs on, put the little feet and put the hat on the number. So when somebody tries to change it, it's going to draw attention to it, and you're going to go, gee, what happened to that number? But these things still happen all the time. Now, for those of you that are working with the contractor, this could be a very legitimate document, and you're out in the field and you decide that, no, we're not going to do that 3,000 after the roofing is complete or after the rough plumbing is in. So we'll cross that out. Now let me initial these. Now let me date these. You're probably writing on the hood of a big truck that has a convex surface, you know, your big Ford, your GMC truck. How many of these additions are genuine and how many of these additions might have been added later? And this is very typical of the way we do work with contractors out in the field. You've got to pull out your laptop there, right then and there, or go back to your office and memorialize it, document it. Met today, March 18th, discussed that we would not do the payment after the roofing is complete, but we would do such and such, da, 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 da. You send it to yourself, you send it to them, and you send it to a third party. Please acknowledge that you've received this, and this is what we agreed to. I know it sounds like a lot of work, but there are nightmares that go on when you allow this to be your receipt. Also, we have kids that are helping their parents, doing a lot with their real estate now. Scanning is, oh, I could tell you horror stories and nightmares with cut and paste and scanning, but let's look at an example. Okay, Mr. H dies. He has no immediate children, and he leaves a $3 million Santa Barbara hillside home with an ocean view to his niece. 2 years later, the niece decides to sell the home. She never moved into it. She stayed in her own home with her kids, but it was there. Now, the buyer was a movie director on deadline in South Africa. He couldn't come in and sign this and sign that and deal with this and deal with that. Now, Mr. A resides uphill behind Mr. H. And all of a sudden, when they're going to sell the house, he comes in with a PDF of an easement giving him view rights, which could jeopardize the sale of the home. So here's Santa Barbara, and here's the property. It's way up here in the hills. It has unobstructed view of all of Santa Barbara and the water. It's a beautiful dream piece of property. Okay, can you see my cursor? I need somebody to speak out loud.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this really is almost a triple piece of property. It's an older home. Quite honestly, it's a tear down. He had lived in it for over 40 years. It loved it and enjoyed it, but had not done a lot of improvements. But look, you have no neighbors over here. You have no neighbors over here. And you have this incredible property that you could do everything with. This is Mr. H. Here's the neighbor behind him who comes up with this document that says, I know what's going to happen when they sell that house. There goes my view. He's got a pool, as you see on the lower level. You come up here, this is the kitchen dining room. So he comes up with this document that says that Mr. H, who lived down below, granted him this easement. And he gets very specific as far as, you know, my pool area, my kitchen balcony, my upper balconies. It got to preserve the view, and this view easement is binding on my property and to be honored by any successor. And they said to me, is this Mr. Hutchison's signature? And I won't get into that part of the case, but it was Mr. Hutchison's signature. He was elderly. I had many, many samples of his signature, and it was his signature. Now, I didn't say he signed this. I said, this is his signature. Okay, so this is a very damaging piece of evidence as far as this is going to put a monkey wrench in the sale of this $3 million property. So Mr. A said he typed this easement on his own computer, because we said, well, where did this come from? Because Mr. H is an elderly man. He didn't use computers. He didn't have a computer. Mr. A said, no, we talked about it. And I typed it up for him and I handed it to him. And then he made revisions and he returned it to me. Of course, he didn't even spell his name right. And the elderly gentleman didn't bother to correct the misspelling of the name. And then Mr. A, who lives behind, I'll just call him Mr. Behind, came and made revisions. He returned it to Mr. H, who signed it. We said, where's the original? Oh, well, Mr. H kept the original. Well, it wasn't in his safety deposit box. It wasn't anywhere in his home because it never existed. So I took a look at it and I said, something's going on here. I got all his signatures. I did say his signature was genuine, but when I enlarged it, look at the pixelation on this. This has been scanned. This has been lifted off of another document and scanned onto this document. Now, you would think that that would make Mr. A, who lives behind, run, put his tail between his legs and run away. Oh, no. He had a story for that. He said, in 2013, I digitized all my important papers, including prior scans, using optical character recognition software. I won't get into everything that OCR does, but he had a story about why it looks scanned. So I scanned the entire document to illustrate if the entire document had been scanned, it would look like this. You see how this is scanned, but look at the typography here. You can tell the whole thing has been scanned. So when you compare what he provided to what we did, this is scanned, but this is laser printer, solid black, no evidence of scanning. This is the original printing. Had his story been correct, the type would have looked like this. It would have looked more like what the signature looked like. Now mine looks more rough, if you will, because mine is now a scan of a scan. Every time, every generation you get removed. Now, what happened when we showed him that? Did he go away? No, he had another story. Well, there's a better version of the document. There's a JPEG. I gave you the PDF, but the JPEG is attached to the emails that I sent to Mr. Hutchinson's niece before they were master scanned. Just get her emails and you'll have the JPEG and you'll see that it's original. You know, well, what happened was the niece said, I never had an email from him in my life, much less an attachment to an email. And all the stories that he came up with, and he'd emailed this and he emailed that, it didn't jibe with the other stories that he had told. So needless to say, that document never existed. So then we enhanced it further, and all of a sudden you notice there looks like there's a line here, and it almost looks like the corner has been cut out here, which is exactly what had happened. Because if you're just scanning it, it should all have a certain background. You're never going to have a darker gray line underneath it. You enhance it even further, even though this looks thick and fuzzy and not in focus, it enhances these cut lines that you see here. So obviously he cut and pasted this signature. Actually, he did it from a Christmas card that this lovely old man had sent his neighbor a Christmas card, and he cut it out. Now you see when you enhance it, of course, this looks fuzzy and dark and thick right now, but that's because we wanted to enhance that this signature had been cut and pasted onto this easement. Can this work always be done? No, I'm sorry to tell you that many, many times this work is done and it can't be enhanced like this. It all depends. And then when you look at the metadata, and things have changed with the metadata too, you can see that it was altered again. The last time it was done was in 2018, when Mr. Hutchinson had been long dead before 2018, when this guy showed up with the document. Now, metadata is changing as well. Unfortunately, you used to be able to see a chain of every time a document was altered, and now don't get me started with technology. I want to talk to Adobe, because now sometimes just the last alteration is showing up. This is a situation where a woman bought a home and she moved in, and later she moved her boyfriend in with her. She had purchased it and made the down payment. Later, she put him on title. They were going to be married. Well, the relationship fell apart, and she's the one who broke up the relationship. So she let him continue to live there out of guilt. And suddenly he shows up with this thing one day that says, oh, hang on. Well, all right. Here, I, Diane, agree to sign off on the Carson City, Nevada thing. At the time the property is sold, I'm requesting 10% of the profits of the home or a maximum of $20,000. Who in their right mind would make up this document and sign it for a property in Nevada, which of course she did not. But once again, her name was on there. So I said to the attorneys, you've got to give me samples of her handwriting. And the first thing they gave me was this. I said, you have to be kidding. That's the best you've got. I need better. I need better. You've got to give me good quality. Well, think about it. This is what they gave me at first, but this is what they were able to finally come up with. But when I looked at it, again, if you're giving me copies of copies of copies, this writing looks like it's been patched, which happens with forgeries, where the person will write the D, maybe they're tracing her signature. They'll write the D, stop, pick up the pen, write the I, stop, write the A. Now you can see very clearly here from between the N and the N picked up, stopped the pen, picked it up, added the E as a single letter. This writing is all patched, but the writing they originally gave me looked nice and smooth. This is the same signature, but look at this. So this one I wanted to show you because it's really interesting, but I realized we've had delays and delays and delays, and this still has not gone to court. So I just want to give you an idea of what happened. Mr. C submits a contract he claims was signed by Mr. X. Mr. X claimed he never signed it, but he did say, hey, it looks like my signature, which is what Diane would have said, which is what Mr. Hutchison would have said, because it was a cut and paste. We were able to find in the Beaufort County, South Carolina Register of Deeds, the mortgage that contained the signature that he cut and pasted into the document. I can't show you the whole case, but I can tell you that those are matter of public record. And now let's say you had two business partners. You never would have been able to do this because there'd be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of samples of signatures. But since they only had done a couple of real estate transactions and this culprit didn't have copies of his writing, he went to the public records and lifted a signature off of a mortgage. But even if the source signature had not been found, we still would have won the case. Well, we're going to court, we'll see, because they are identical characteristics of the two signatures. He didn't place it on the line correctly. The length of the line is wrong. There were many, many things that I wish I could show you were wrong. But I did want to give you some idea of what people are doing in the real estate world. Now, this is an interesting, I'm going to show you the actual document, but first I had to make up a dummy to show you what was going on. This man was handed a piece of paper that looked like this. Here's the agreement. Then down at the bottom, there was an X with a line, and the partner said, sign here. And he did. But why was there all this blank space here? Because what happened is, after he got the signature of his partner, he cut the paper in half, wrote an entirely new agreement. You're not going to believe, you're going to think, oh, Ann, you're making this up. This went to court. And he didn't even cut it with scissors. He did the thing where you use a ruler and you tear the paper. And this is what he said, well, you signed this. And he said, I never signed that. Now I'm going to show you the real contract where this was all added later. But the top was torn off, so I couldn't show you the whole thing. But remember, the top is written with one pen and the X and the line, and he hands his partner the pen and says sign. So this is all one pen. Then he had to go back later after he cut this apart and he added this. Now it's all black pen, but is it the same pen? Well, let's take a look. We put it under infrared luminescence, and sure enough, this is the original ink, but when we go to look at the things later that were added, they don't show up because it was a different pen and it was a different ink. Again, this doesn't always happen. You don't always get lucky. You can have two different pens that luminesce the same. We just got lucky. Page substitution. That may sound silly and simple, but it's important. This was a rock band, and these were contracts for each song. You get royalties if you wrote the song. And this is the last page, the signature page that goes on each one of these contracts. But somehow this signature page has been affixed to multiple different contracts. And I won't get into the story of the rock band, but this was significant in our case about he had to come up with where he had said he signed all these different contracts and he had royalties for that, but he didn't. This was a person who had a Bentley, and she took it into a very expensive shop and said, after they filled out the order for service, genuine parts, no generic. And the mechanic had written all that on the receipt. And she did not have her copy of the top receipt anymore. There were problems later with the car, and they found out he'd used parts that weren't parts for a Bentley. And he showed up with a different receipt, but they were able to find these, you know, when you have receipts, there's white and then yellow and then pink and then goldenrod. Sometimes they're 4-up, they're NCR carbonless. And they found one of the copies that had the indentations that showed it said genuine parts, no generic. And he had come up with a completely different invoice that didn't have that information on it. What is the point I'm trying to make to you here? If I didn't have the original, I could not have done the job. If I did not have the original on that contract, I could not have done the job. And we have become scan happy, PDF happy, computer happy, where we're losing so much detail that we're not going to be able to help you with these things anymore, because everybody's using electronic signatures, digital signatures. This is a whole hour presentation, which I can't even get into here. But I just wanted to tell you, I wanted to make sure you understand, you check this box, that's considered by law a signature. These are legal signatures, a voice signature, a video signature. It's covered by the law and you've agreed to it. And boy, if you ever saw what you agreed to when you check the box with Google, none of us read those agreements. Do you remember the case with Enron? And they didn't want to show their emails between partners about what they were saying, about what they had done with falsifying profits. Well, they couldn't block those emails because they didn't own those emails. Google owns your emails. You can't fight that in court. Now, if you were with Yahoo, you own your own emails, but Google owns everything. Every one of these slides I'm showing you actually has a story of about half an hour behind it. All right, this is signing with DocuSign. This is something I signed. This is in the background. I signed at this corner, and I signed in this corner of the building on this corner. And it will show you where I was longitudinally and latitudinally and when I signed. Why is that important? Remember the family where the son stole all those properties from his siblings? And he said, well, Mom, I have to tell you on that case, I have to tell you what we did. He said, we supposedly picked a random case, but I had asked the attorney, I said, could we have her medical records? And so we were saying, so when she gave you the Best Buy, what happened there? Well, she came in and we went to such and such for lunch, and she signed this paper. Now notice, this would tell you where and when the document was really signed. Were you really at that restaurant? Were you really there at noon? Whatever. Once he got him on the record to say, yes, she wanted me, she said, happy birthday, and I want you to have the Best Buy, and I think you'll manage it very well, and I know you'll always take care of your sisters. We slid this paperwork across the table that said, that's really interesting, because on that day, September 14th at noon that you were talking about, she was under general anesthetic having bladder surgery in such and such a hospital. And the attorney stopped the deposition in its tracks and said, we're over, this is done here. And he was white as a sheet. And the attorney had said to me, I thought you were just wasting time when you asked for her medical records. And I said, but she was elderly, she did calligraphy, she did script writing, she did print writing. I wanted to see what she was capable of at the time. And we just happened to find dates coinciding with all those notarized signatures. He had her signature notarized on September 14th, when she was under general anesthetic. And she was not in that location that he said she was. So this is very difficult for me because I have no feedback from you guys. So I have no idea if you're even there anymore.
I put wow in the chat.
But see, I can't even see the chats and I can't see the questions because my presentation is taking up the whole screen. Now, there are all kinds of things. The train has left the station as far as DocuSign or any digital or Adobe Sign. There are 22 different companies now that have digital signatures. And they've done a very good job of making sure that it's covered in the courts. It says no specific technology or process is mandated. They have done, now look at this, preempts any state laws not consistent with it. A contract cannot be denied legal effect. I mean, they really did a good job in Washington and covered themselves by all the different laws. It's legal. But I have to tell you, there are some loopholes, at least for me, with electronics, and they comply with the federal rules of evidence. Now look at this. For electronically stored information, original means any printout or other output readable by sight. Remember the Rod Hutchison signature? It's certainly readable by sight. That would be considered an original now. Can you see the problems that are going to happen in court when everybody starts cutting and pasting signatures? If it actually reflects the information, well, it reflects the fact that it's his signature and it's considered legal. Now, where can you not use electronic signatures yet? Wills, codicils to wills, adoption and divorce papers. But I talked to a family law lawyer and she said she believes that you can now use electronic signatures in divorce proceedings. I don't even want to get into that with husbands and wives signing for each other. I cannot tell you how important a wet signature is. I want you to be thinking about when you're gone and everything you want to leave to the ones you love is in your will, and somebody can come along and now you can sign with your finger on a pad, and what's going to happen? In Dallas, there was a contract between two companies. The contract that one guy signed, it supposedly came from John Doe. It wasn't really John Doe. These people had set up a different email for a John Doe, made it look, I'm using the generic John Doe, made it look like it was John Doe's signature, but it wasn't. And this guy signed this DocuSigned this contract with this guy. He thought he was signing with this guy, but he was signing with somebody else. An adult son opened a DocuSign account for his father. His father had had a stroke. He became paralyzed on his right side. He was unable to sign with his right hand. It was very difficult to sign with his left hand. His son, who was like 50, said, "Don't worry, Dad. There's this great new thing and we'll take care of it for you. And all you have to do is push a button and you can sign." And he began transferring his father's property to himself. So there are safeguards that I feel that need to be put in at the beginning. I had someone who, she was also from Texas. And she said, I took out a life insurance policy for my son, who's a minor, and they just had me open an account for him and one for myself. She said, it's so easy. I can open an account for anybody. That doesn't feel very safe. So personally, I feel that some precautions should be put in at the beginning, even though everybody's saying, oh, should be, it's just faster and easier. Now, I will tell you about a company I really like called Notarize. And yes, it's electronic. And yes, you sign with your finger on your phone, but they have some security measures in place that I really like. Just like the other softwares, you upload your document. We're almost done for those of you that are watching your clocks. So we're getting there. But you connect by video, you sign and notarize. Now, this is really important. In 2011, the Commonwealth of Virginia passed a law to become the first state. All 50, so this notarized, and it's about $25, I think, to notarize. It's good in all 50 states 24/7. You can be in Las Vegas at 3 o'clock in the morning, and for some reason you need something notarized. You can be in Florida, at 11:30 at night and you need something notarized. What happens is you go online, and I've done this, okay? And a live person comes online and it's all videotaped. So I want you to be thinking about elder fraud, because we'll talk about that in a second. So it's this person when I sign in, I get asked 5 security questions. If I can't answer 4 of the questions in, 2 minutes or whatever, it gives me another chance. And then if I still can't, they close me out and I can't notarize for at least 24 hours, and they will red flag that account. Once, if I can answer correctly, I take a picture of my ID, my driver's license front and back. There's software that you can identify to make sure that's a valid ID. Okay, now here's what's interesting about the 5 security questions. I don't put in my mother's maiden name. I don't put in where I was born. They pull all this off the web. I never had to fill out anything for these security questions. And they were asking about the mascot of the college where I attended. They knew that, because all of that is, we have no privacy anymore. And I don't put a lot of info. Think about what I do for a living. I put very little information out there, but it's still all out there, which really surprised me by the questions they asked me. So I accept the changes. I'm connected to a live person. She witnesses me electronically sign. Yes, I'm signing with my finger. And then she notarizes it, and now it's stored online. Now, all video calls are recorded because that's a Virginia statute. So I asked her about elder fraud, and she said to me, today I notarized for a 94-year-old woman. In a regular notarization, I would say, do you understand what the document is? If the person's elderly, I say, can you explain what this document is? And I make her answer me, and it's all videotaped, and you'll see if she's clear or not clear, if she understands. And nobody can answer for them, and they listen for ambient sound. So if they hear, come on, mom, sign, come on, sign the will, they stop everything. They asked everybody to leave the room. They have the elder person turn the phone around and scan the room. They take them step by step how to do this if they don't know how to do it. Any hesitation, any suspicion, they disconnect the call. And they recommend that you call signingagent.com, where a live notary comes to the phone if they feel comes to the home. If they feel there's any undue influence at all, they're not going to notarize it. They put something in place. And then whatever state you're in, you can click on your state, what is notarized, and they give you what the law is in your state that supports the fact that you can electronically notarize. So sometimes when I'm telling people all this is kind of what I feel like when I ask for the medical records, when I ask for more samples of handwriting, when I ask for elderly handwriting, and people say, oh, Ann, you're being too picayune.
God, help me. Help me, Rod. Help me. Help you. Help me. Help you. Help me. Help you.
And that's what I feel like sometimes. So I hope I haven't overloaded you with too much. I'll stop the screen share here. Let me escape this. And I do have a handout that has a bunch of tips and tricks for you. I know you can't see it with the background. That I believe Terry is going to post for you with the video for you to some things you can do to your will. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not licensed to practice law. These are just my personal tips, and it says on there, consult with your attorney, but we give you some ideas of how to protect yourself. And does anybody have any questions? I haven't looked at the chat because I haven't been able to see that screen.
This is Jesse Lane. I think this was fantastic presentation, by the way. Thank you. One question did come up. I'm not sure if it's really related, but after a bad experience years and years and years ago, where because something was not dated with my signature, I religiously put a written date right after my signature every single time. But on a recent refi, they would not let me put a written date on the document next to my signature. They said the whole refi would be voided at that point if they saw that.
I'm going to check with a mortgage broker that I work with. I never heard that. That's outrageous.
Yep, that was Flagstar.
And why would that make it null and void?
That's what they told me. They said that it was that I was not allowed to. That there were some documents I did have to put in the date, or there would be a problem there. But
Did you ask them if you could sign it on the reverse? I mean, if it happens again, and I'll talk about slip sheeting for a second, what people are doing with like a will now, they're smart enough, they'll keep dad's real signature on the last page and they'll go and change page 3 and say, you know, that house in Tahoe I was going to leave to my son, I really think I'm going to leave it to my faithful executor. And you're like, and they're going, but it's his signature, he signed it. Yeah, but they changed page 3. I have people sign every page.
Yes.
So that you can't be slip sheeted, it can't be removed. And I have them date every page. Again, it's all in the written stuff that you'll receive. But Flagstar, I don't know. I don't have an answer for you, but that's the kind of thing that keeps me up at night.
Yeah.
I do want to say there's a question in here in the chat that says, can you determine forgery without having the original document? The answer is it all depends. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. Now, it's always a red flag when the original doesn't show up, because if there's cut and paste, if there's whatever, of course, nobody wants the original. But, well, how do I, the thing you saw with Rod Hutchinson, I didn't have the original on that. I had a scan, and the where we showed you the cut marks, and there was somebody that was still able to do it. You're not gonna believe this, with an Apple iPhone. They had from a photo, they adjusted the settings and did different things, and we were able to get it. So yes, you can sometimes without the original. I talked to the person that did my will and trust, because they scan the wills and trust, but it's just a storage thing. And then they throw away the original. It said, you throw away my originals, you are not my lawyer. You are keeping my originals on file. And what I do when I work with people in wills and trusts and estates is I have them send a card to their client every 5 years and have them re-sign the card and date the card, just so they have an update of what the person's handwriting looks like at the time. Or come in and you don't have to reprint the will. You can just turn it over and sign on the back. I don't want them to reprint. I want the old signature and the newer, more aged signature, if you will. Now, let me see. It's your recommendation to always keep the, yes, it's my recommendation to always keep the original. The reason is, and I am giving you the tip of the iceberg. I could tell you horror stories for a month, not just a day or a week. I see it all the time. And where are they going to go? They're going to go to the person whose documents are most vulnerable. I mean, if you let people know, no, I keep my originals and I sign every, they're going to find another target. There's 77 million people over 70 years of age who have a lot of money because they were savers, not spenders. So it's just, you know, that's why the scammers are in Arizona and Florida and Texas, because that's where the money is with the old people. I mean, there's so much. I was at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences conference 2 weeks ago. That's a lot of law enforcement. Almost every program for 3 days was on digital signatures. And what are we going to do about digital signatures? See, what happens is everybody wants to be first to market and capture the high ground. And then they go back later and put in the safety precautions and the measures. You can open a DocuSign account in somebody else's name right now. And there are all kinds of layers of security in there. There's voice recognition, but they want it to look simple. Look, it's so simple. You can do this in 5 minutes. You can sign. Okay, we're going to sell a health spa in Hawaii, and we have an offer from Germany, an offer from California, an offer from Hawaii, and everybody can put their bids in really fast, and then we can sign those contracts and get them done. And I get it. If I were in real estate, I'd want it done the same way. But how do you know who's really signing and who those people are? What measures were put in place up front? There, you can put measures in place up front. Like you saw that thing, the map, exactly where I was when I signed. Did you even know that that's in the background to DocuSign? Actually, I don't know if it's in the background anymore. That was 2016. And I can't tell you what I had to go through to find somebody to talk, because they they had to vet me first to make sure I wasn't some kind of a crook saying, you know, what are all the safety measures that you have in place? But your kids are going to buy a house and sign with their finger on their iPad while they're in Mexico on vacation. I mean, that's how it is.
Can blockchain potentially help with some of this?
Yeah. And there were, yes, and there's a long answer to that. And I'm not qualified to answer it, but there were lectures on that. And what I'd love to come back sometime and show you. There was a guy that did a whole thing on Adobe and different, let's say you and I have the same document, but we print it out on different printers. As you know, it's going to look completely, it can look different. It can look like the document's been altered or something happened to it, and that's not really true. It's legitimate. He showed us all these variations that can happen when you're scanning and when you're doing this. And you might be falsely accused of cut and paste. You might, because everything's the world's going to be electronic. And so I'm getting together with him, Zoom wise, and I want to learn everything I can that he has done. He used to be law enforcement, and what they're doing to, well, there's nothing you can do if you're on a Mac and I'm on a PC and you're printing here and I'm printing it, and they're going to look different, and they're absolutely legitimately the same document. You send a copy of your will to your three daughters, and the three daughters in three different parts of the country print it out, and it could look like it. Two could look exactly the same and identical, and one could look different. I'm just kind of, I would say, I'm just kind of letting you know what's out there now. You're not going to sleep at night. The point is, protect yourself any way you can. And I'm sorry to hear that. I am astonished that for the refi, you can't put the date on there. That just blows me away. I would be happy to talk to whoever did that, just to ask them some questions. If you feel comfortable emailing me their contact information, I would love to research that.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. But I will tell you that it wasn't my first experience either.
Of being told don't date it?
That's right. And every time I explained to them about the case back in the 1980s where there was no date with my signature for some reason, and as a result, the claim I was making just completely fell apart.
I'm not understanding their reasons why it delegitimizes it.
I don't know either. The person that comes to your house to get to do all the stuff, they don't even know why. It's the company that's making the rules.
Well, we need to check into that, don't we?
Flagstar.
Well, they're certainly not taking care of you, helping you.
I know.
And how does it help them?
I never understood it. That's Flagstar.
I mean, they better have a good explanation of how it helps them. Yeah, well, anyway, if you want to get me that, now let me look through. You determine forgeries is listening. There is your recommendation to always keep the originals. Yes. The price range of your services. I'm like any other expert witness. It's a standard rate 10, 10, 2. Do you want to record the session? Okay. So I can send you a CV and a fee schedule and all that if you want it. I think, Terry, you're going to put up on the web what you need. I don't need DocuSign coming after me now that we're recording this. I'm just saying I have found people have said it's, well, as I say, here's a woman who, now her son, she was buying life insurance for him. He's a minor, but she said, I'm astonished I can just open an account in somebody's name. And because they didn't ask for different layers of security, and maybe they have those layers of security built in that she could have requested. You need my voice for voice recognition. You need that, but they didn't explain that to her, because people today, particularly kids today, they want to make it simple. And as Chip Connolly, who used to own the Joie de Vivre hotel chain, said, people now on business stay twice as long at a hotel. We're not just visiting. He said, we're a nomad nation. They are there in their hotel room doing business, because you can do business from anywhere if you have a laptop, if you have an iPhone. We're a nomad nation. But have we thought about security measures to put in place, or did we just throw it all out there? Aren't you amazed when you look up something on Google and all of a sudden all these ads start coming up for whatever it is, for your lawn, for clothing? It's like they've got everything on you, and you didn't give it to them, right?
My name's Andrew Hernandez, and I was trying to do a sale here in Stockton, California. My client was in India, and you need an apostille certificate by a judge to say the notary is an actual notary. So you can't just get a notary. That notary has to go to court and get a document signed saying, I am a good notary, before that document can be.
And thank you, Andrew. And the reason I like notarized is that, okay, I told you they videotaped what I did. It's stored in the cloud for 5 years. Now, I'd love it for elder fraud if it was stored in the cloud for 10 years. But let's say I'm a little addlepated, or I have the onset of dementia or whatever. You can go back later and look at that video for up to 5 years and say, here she was signing this quitclaim deed where she gave the property over to so-and-so. I mean, they didn't have to build that feature in, but they did. Thank you, Andrew.
Does anyone else have a question before we close the session?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm running over.
No, that's quite all right. Very interesting stuff.
Can you hear me? I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a realtor. In a real estate transaction, say if somebody sells a house and forge the elderly person's signature, and you close escrow, you close the deal, and then it's discovered later down the road that it was forged. How many years?
I'm not an attorney. You'd have to talk to a real estate attorney. You certainly, I will tell you this too, though. It's civil, not criminal, but I have had people tell me that once they go to a real estate attorney, they get it figured out, then they turn that person over who did the forgery to the board of realtors, who has deep pockets, who have, a whole slew of attorneys on their team who may want to pursue that, because all you want to do is get it right for your client. Because what if somebody signed for the elderly and then they right away go around and flip that house and sell it to somebody else with a clouded title, which happens a lot, where they take from an elderly person and they have no plans to stick around and move in. They just want to flip it and sell it to somebody else. So you would have to contact a real estate attorney about the statute of limitations on fraud on that. But I have worked on cases where it's been several years and they didn't get the property. I don't know if we're still taping this or not. I want to be careful when I do this from memory. They caught the culprit, but they didn't get the property back. It had been sold twice after that to somebody, and then that were legitimate sales. So it would have to be a financial compensation.
Yeah, the title company will have to compensate because they're the ones that gives the title insurance. And the next question, do we get your information? Do you?
You can just go to forgerysleuth.com. You can go to you can Google catchaforger.com and I should come up. My website is forgerysleuth.com, but nobody can spell forgery and nobody can spell sleuth. But I'm there, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to give it here. So I don't want to break any rules. But it will be on the handout that Terry will put up. You posted on the web, is that right?
Yes.
I'll email.
I'm going to end the recording right now.
Thank you very much. Really.